I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Destin City Council, September 16, 2019, to order. We have Reverend Logan Landis of Grace Lutheran Church to lead us in our invocation tonight. Thank you, Reverend.
Heavenly Father, you are the creator and sustainer of all things. Please bless this community, Destin. Guard and protect her. Grow her and help her to thrive. Guard all law enforcement, firefighters, medical responders, and the work that they do as they serve this community. And grant wisdom to our governmental leaders. Be with the meeting here tonight. Let all business be done honorably and in a manner pleasing to you. Help all be good citizens of this fair community. We pray this all in Jesus Christ's name, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.
Helps if I turn on the button. Tonight, before we get into our normal council proceedings, we have a special public hearing for fiscal year 2020 millage rate and budget. Mr. Bowman.
Yes, Mayor. We have the second reading of Ordinance 1921 CN, an ordinance of the City of Destin of Okaloosa County, Florida, adopting the final levying of ad valorem taxes for the City of Destin for fiscal year 2020 and providing for an effective date. Council of note, the proposed millage rate of 1.6150 mils is more than the rolled back rate of 1.5447 mils by 4.35%. This is a public hearing.
Thank you, sir. At this, bless you. At this portion of the meeting, I'm going to go ahead and open it for public comment first, and then we will do we can do that. The approval, the agenda approval, we'll do that after this portion, Mr. Mitchell. We'll open up for the public hearing portion of this adoption of the second reading of Ordinance 1921 CN. I don't have any cards. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to make a public comment on this ordinance? Seeing none, I'll open up at this time, council, for a motion.
I'll make that motion. I move the council adopt ordinance 19-21-CN on second reading, adopting the FY 2020 millage rate of 1.6150 mils, which is more than the rollback rate of 1.5447 mils.
I'll second it, Mayor.
I got a motion and I have a second. Is there any further comment at this time? Seeing none. The vote is unanimous, so moved. Mr. Bowman.
We have the second reading of Ordinance 1922 CN, an ordinance of the City of Destin making appropriations for certain expenditures, expenses, capital improvements, and certain indebtedness of the City of Destin, Florida for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2019 and ending September 30, 2020, and providing for an effective date. And this is a public hearing.
Thank you, sir. And at this portion for item B, I will open up public comment. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion. I move the council adopt ordinance 19-22-CN on second reading to provide for a balanced budget for FY 2020.
I'll second it, Mayor.
I have a motion, a second. Is there any further comment on the budget? Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
I wanted to, it's too late now, but I wanted to pull 2A and have the presentation by our guests before we voted on this, but obviously it's too late. I wanted to have the presentation by the county before we voted on the budget.
Well, I can't do that, right?
If it's the council's will, we could vote to change the agenda and make that presentation happen before the vote, but it's up to the council.
I have no problem if you want to make that motion, I'll second it.
Yeah, I'll make the motion that we move 2A before we do the budget.
2A or 2B? Oh, I see.
We've already-
Never mind, duh. Yeah,
2A.
gotcha.
So 2A is just being moved up before you take this vote, is essentially what you're doing. That's what the motion is.
Well, could you justify that?
Well, depending on some of the information we get from the county would determine how I vote on the budget.
Well, I don't think the,
Okay, it's fine, it's okay, no problem.
Mr. Minchell, I would recommend that we just let this vote happen. We can have the county present. I believe that the TDC issue is set for this budget. We can always make budget amendments later on if we need to.
That's fine, I'll withdraw my motion.
thank you, sir, appreciate it. All right, we've had a second reading of ordinance 1922 CN. We've had a motion, we've had a second. Is there any other discussion on this motion? Seeing none? The vote is unanimous, so moved. Now we're for agenda approval. Matters not specifically listed on the agenda may be added or acted upon with the supermajority vote of the council members present.
Move to approve.
I got a motion to approve.
Second.
Got a second? Vote is unanimous, so moved. Under item 1A, we have approval of the minutes of July 15, 2019, the regular city council meeting.
I'll make that motion, Mayor.
I got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the minutes? Seeing none? Vote is unanimous, so moved. All right, item 2A, TDC Taxing District, Okaloosa County Administrator John Hofstad, Commissioner Kelly Wines, and Attorney Greg Stewart. So whoever wants to be first, come on up. Thank you for attending, Commissioner.
Thanks for having us. Glad to be here. I'm Kelly Wines, make my residence at 787 Spring Lake Drive, Destin, Florida. I guess the reason we're here is to talk about this expansion of the TDC district. I'll tell you what I know about it, and then if we need some help, we got some more backup behind me. We're very early in the process. There has been some inquiries from northern cities and districts inquiring what would it take to do it, could we do it, and how many would be for it. And I think as of now, the only official request we have comes from the city of Niceville. But I'd say we're well over a year away from any action on it as far as getting on the ballot. But the way it should work is that we would take to the Board of County Commissioners an ordinance to be passed, which would stipulate the whys and the wherefores of it. It would, in my view, and I've said this to the TDC as well as the Board of County Commissioners, and Mr. Destin can attest to this. One of the main sticking points, as I see it, is that the proportions or the percentages have got to be nailed down where everybody's confident that the right money is spent in the right district. For instance, right now it's about 2/3, 1/3 from Fort Walton, Mary Esther area and Destin, and that's what I've always stuck to. Now, as I understand it, the TDC director is trying to hire somebody to make an even more accurate, detailed measurement of those percentages. So for my vote anyway, nothing's going to be passed until we clear that up completely, because that's the main sticking point to it. As I understand it, it would go, if the ordinance passes and if it goes to a referendum on the ballot, that according to the Attorney General, and this is probably where we have a difference of opinion, the districts or areas that are wanting to come in vote on their own business, so to speak. I don't think the existing districts get a say-so in that part of it. I know that we're not in agreement on that, but that's the way we see it from the county side. So other than that, it's basically, they're wanting to, they have the same problems we do. They have visitors and they have infrastructure needs, and they're wanting to take some of that money that's, the TDC has finally let us spend for those things and better their lot. That's as simple as that. Mr. Mayor, is there any questions?
Yeah, I have one, and my main concern, and you and I have talked about this before, is under the present system, if we add a taxing district to the county, my main concern would be if we lose a position sitting on that seat, to be a voting member.
Well, that's a valid concern. We've pretty well addressed that. If we need the county attorney to speak to that, he's assured me that he's got a way to include, Destin will retain his seat on the council and won't be diminished, so to speak.
Yeah, that would have to be written into the ordinance to where that couldn't get readdressed or revoted
Yeah.
or something like that for us to
Greg, you
support
want to
it.
speak to that a minute?
Would you like to address that, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Greg Stewart, County Attorney. There were several issues that have been addressed and brought to our attention that, and I've had communications with your city attorney and land use attorney. We have what we have contemplated doing, that in the event we get direction to expand the district. The way it reads under the statute is that you have to have 2 municipal representatives, but the most populous one is required to be there, which would be Crestview. However, what we have done, and we've looked at some language, that we can designate one of the tourist industry positions as a permanent City of Destin or Fort Walton, so that there would not be, Fort Walton would continue to have a seat at the table, Destin would have a seat at the table, and then Crestview pursuant to the statute. Now, it would be a little heavy governmental side, but that would make sure that everybody who has a voice currently from a government would still have that voice. The other issue I wanted to kind of touch on a little bit, Chairman Wines talked about in terms of the use of the revenues. It is important to recognize that if there is an expansion of the TDC boundaries, every dime that is currently in the coffers now in the reserves is required to be spent in the existing district boundaries. None of that money can be siphoned off to go north. There was some discussions at the workshop that we had in the spring on our budget. And that workshop recognized that the citizens and the jurisdictions within the south part of the county, they are contributing revenues, and that we want to assure that the revenues that come from the south stay and provide services and infrastructure that is there. And so that is going to be a component of the ordinance or the revised tourist development plan that would assure that there would be an equitable distribution of the money, and that the south would not subsidize the north, and nor would the north subsidize the south.
Yeah, because we've all been at the Triumph meetings, and we know that they pretty much told Crestview if they wanted Triumph money for the bypass, that they had to somehow input $36 or $41 million, and so that's where this taxing district idea came from, and that's a big chunk of change, so that's always been a concern. I think Mr. Overdeer has something he'd like to ask.
Okay, I guess I'm confused. Did you say Niceville is the one that's wanting to come into the TDT?
Niceville is one of the cities.
And is Crestview already in?
No.
So, but they just have a seat at the table?
Well, if in fact the boundaries are expanded, it is required that the representative of the most populous city in the county has a seat at the table, if they're within the boundaries.
Oh, okay, so even though Niceville's the one asking to come in, everybody's going to come in?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So then I guess that leads me to my other 500-pound gorilla in the room question, is that, so that means then the pie is going to get a little bit bigger, because we're going to collect money from everybody else that's outside the district right now. So the pie gets bigger, but because the state, I think, tells us that it has to be distributed initially based on population. We know Crestview is, what, 35,000? We're like 13,000? So does that mean?
It does not have to be distributed by population.
Skip, I think you're thinking of the half-cent sales tax. That-
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, there you
Mr. Destin has a few questions.
Yeah, I agree with the chairman. I understand Niceville's motivations and Crestview's motivations to want to improve their lot. If I was in their situation, I would attempt perhaps the same thing. My deepest concern is that I know how politics goes long term. And we cannot guarantee as the city of Destin that we will have a non-acrimonious relationship with a future county, and I have no reason to question the motivations of anybody who's asking for this right now. But in the future, I need to know that we would actually be forever protected, that it could not be somehow changed. And when you talked about this revised tourism development plan, my concern is that it would be only enshrined through resolution or ordinance, which would only take a 3-2 vote of a future unknown council to completely unravel. Once the district is expanded, and as long as 2 votes from the north can cajole a 3rd vote from the south, you could conceivably change all sorts of the arrangement without it being codified at the state level. And that is where my big concern becomes, and it's not a questioning of any of your motives, it's just out of an abundance of caution for a future council so that I can make sure, a future commission, to make sure that Destin is forever protected and that the equitable split that we all agree to is forever enshrined and cannot be unraveled but for a change in some sort of legislation. So to my point is, why can't we explore a way to nail this all down and have the legislation recodified so that everyone understands that this shall be the way it will be preserved in a future layout. That way, we don't have to, I won't be able to support it if everybody says, well, we're just going to do it by ordinance, because I know that that is not a surefire way to protect the city, because my only option is to suggest that we do it codified at the legislative level. Is that an option agreeable to the county? Because again, I want to be a team player. I understand that these guys need revenues, and I understand that if it's equitably done, I don't think the city of Destin would have a whole lot of heartburn, but it needs to be done in an ironclad way that couldn't be unraveled by a future commission. That's my point.
Well, let me speak to that briefly. At this point in time, we don't have any direction to expand anything. All we've done is talk conceptually. I certainly recognize your point, and I'm sure you've talked to your council that there are inabilities and limitations under our Constitution to be able to bind your board forever and the county forever. However, what I have committed to Mr. Baumann, Ms. Kopp, is that whatever we put together, we will work with them in terms of drafting that language. If in fact we can achieve a comfort level that you may have, then maybe we've been successful without legislation. If in fact we're not able to achieve that comfort level, that may be an option. But we don't have direction from our board on whether they would consider that, other than we recognize and understand your concern.
And you said there'll be further workshops and discussions with the county commissioners
There'll
on
certainly
this that
be-
we can attend and make our feelings known.
Absolutely, and again, the goal was that once we being staff, are given direction to go forward and start putting this ordinance together, that we would work with your legal counsel. They could see the language, they could see how we're crafting the language to make sure that you are assured a position, how the money will be spent to make sure that there is accountability for the money collected in the south and the money collected in the north, and in terms of being able to provide as much certainty as possible going forward. And I would work with your counsel on that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, well, any and all, it doesn't matter. So my first question is that the information that you gave us tonight is a little different than what we've received before in terms of the district, not the south end, not subsidizing the north end. In fact, what we had originally been told was that we could potentially actually be used as a subsidizer for the remainder of the county. So I'm wondering why the difference in the language, why the two different sides?
Well, I don't know the source of your information. All I'm telling you is that that was a topic that came up at our workshop when we were setting forth our budget issues. and that was where the issue came up as far as the potential expansion. And at that meeting, the county commission, in a workshop format, in fact, discussed that exact problem to assure that there was accountability in terms of the northern revenues, the southern revenues. The issue concerning the accumulated revenues is state law. That has to be followed. And my recollection of the workshop is that there was a consensus of all 5 board members that that needed to be incorporated in any ordinance.
Mr. Bowman?
Yes, Preble, I believe you're probably referring to the agenda item report that was on a previous council meeting. I drafted that report. You are correct, that is what was stated in it. However, I will represent to you that Mr. Stewart and I have talked, and he has assured me that he will work with the city and draft language that would protect the city. Now, I do believe that Mr. Destin's concerns are valid in that not sure that you can bind a future county commission to that ordinance, and that is perhaps where there's potential. I'm not saying it would ever happen, but there's potential that somewhere down the line, Destin could be used as a subsidizer for the north end of the county.
So, all right. The Florida statutes state that whatever is brought in by the special taxing district is equitably split amongst the members of that special taxing district, correct?
Now, I'm not sure exactly that the tourist development tax statute does not specifically say that. What it does say is that it must be spent within the district. It must be spent for tourism-related purposes. The issue concerning previously accumulated revenue has been the subject of an Attorney General's opinion that says that money is the South End's money and must be spent exclusively for the South End. However, if there is an expansion of the TDC boundaries, then that 5 cents will be collected on a countywide basis. And that what the county commission has indicated is that they want to maintain that if in fact money is going to be used for infrastructure, it comes from the south and comes from the north. We don't take south money to build roads or pave dirt roads in the north. We do that in the south. And so that is a commitment that the board has signed off on by consensus at the workshop.
Preble, just to add on to that, I do not believe in the statute, as Mr. Stewart has represented, there is any requirement that the money be equitably distributed within the taxing district itself. The money is subject to recommendations from the TDC to the county commission, and that is who ultimately decides how to spend that money.
But amongst the actual producers of the bed tax, meaning that, you know, if, as it stands now, the bed tax couldn't be spent in Niceville or Crestview because they're not a member of that special taxing district.
That is correct.
Outside of the boundaries of the
Right,
district.
that's what I meant, and perhaps equitable was the wrong word, but that's what I meant, was that you had to be a member in order to receive the funds that were brought in. Okay, so I guess, and I have the same concerns that Mr. Destin does, and that is clearly that there's no guarantee, and, you know, and it's bothered me for ages that Destin, and y'all are well aware that Destin has brought in, obviously, the lion's share, and yet we really feel like we've had to fight. Things have greatly improved, and I thank you all for that, but I do worry about somehow getting the short end of the stick and becoming the subsidizer.
Well, and I recognize that, and certainly and the commission recognizes that. And what we have tried to do, we know there's some sensitivity about expanding the boundaries. We want to address those issues. And the county and the city of Destin, we want to engage in a partnership, and that's why we wanted to work with you when we're drafting this. So you can see exactly what we're doing, protecting your interest, and we can protect all of the county's interests. So we're working together. I think that there's an opportunity for a partnership on this that hopefully will be successful.
Thank you.
Mr. Morgan?
The county currently doesn't have statistics on exactly where the money is generated, correct?
Yes.
Y'all are working to resolve
Well,
that.
in terms of what's coming from what unit, we have limitations from the Department of Revenue as to what they will provide
Is there a
us.
solution there with the department?
We are working on some independent research on that to be able to provide a tool where we can better target where the money is coming from.
And y'all would, and that tool would be in use every year. So every year when you get your revenues, you'd be able to determine where it came from?
That's the intent.
Okay, and
I have can I follow up on that? Because I know in years past, y'all did a great job of putting out a monthly report and then an annual report. And you would list by the special district what each district brought in where, whether it was a short-term rental, whether it was a condo, whether it was what, and it was split out just beautifully. So it was done at one point. Did y'all stop doing that? Because that was incredible data and I can't locate it
I
currently.
would assume that what you're referring to is, we did have the tax collector collecting the tourist development taxes for several years. And a few years ago, we transferred to the Department of Revenue because they don't charge any money to do it. But Revenue has confidentiality requirements that we have to live with, and that is in terms of identifying where the money comes from. And so I would suspect, I don't know for a fact, but I would suspect that that is when the more detailed information was no longer available. What we are talking about, what Mr. Morgan was referring to, is that internally we are looking at developing systems where we could replicate that same information. And so that's hopefully where we're going to end up.
Commissioner Wines, can I have you come back up the podium? I know you announced that you're not going to run, but can you just give us a little overview of how this is going to play out over the next few months prior to November?
Well, I would suppose that those interested parties, being the different municipalities, would make a request to be included in this expanded district, this expanded area. And at some point, well, we've been approached to make it countywide, but we don't have all the parts of the puzzle put together yet. But that's what it's probably headed for, because like Parker said, everybody's looking for that little bit of revenue, in some cases a lot of revenue. So, like I said earlier, we're way early in this process. We hadn't even made any policy about not the referendum, but the ordinance. So we got a ways to go, and we intend to work with your legal folks to get something that will work for everybody. It's going to be a step at a time, and we're not going to rush it. And maybe we get it within a year, maybe we don't.
Okay, and that being said, I would just like to ask if you think it's important that we designate a council member or myself to be part of these discussions in the workshop forums or any other way that you do it.
Well, you're certainly all welcome to come to the workshop and voice your opinion.
Okay.
I don't know if you need a special liaison, but you can all feel welcome to come, and let's beat this thing together.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Any other further questions for the commissioner while he's here? The chairman?
Commissioner, do you have any idea of just ballpark of how much, if this passed and you began collecting revenues from the north end of the county, how much they would actually contribute to the whole pot?
I've heard a number of 4 to 5 million. Greg, you know anything?
But for
about that?
percentage-wise, just out of curiosity, how much is the north end going to contribute?
Well, it's 20 million now, so if it was, say, 4 million, there you have it.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I would estimate, based on the number of rooms that we know of now, it would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of 20%.
One question real quick, John, and you might not know the answer to this, and Greg, maybe you know the answer. A slightly different topic. Do we charge, is it 5 pennies now? Is that,
5 pennies.
Is there a 6th penny potentially available?
There's a 6 penny available based on a threshold amount that you would have to reach to be able to secure that 6 penny.
Okay.
We're not at that volume of receipts coming in now to qualify.
Okay.
I do want to mention the question about where this would go. We had a general discussion about this very topic probably 18 months ago. We did not want to cloud the issue that we were working last year with the local option sales tax. It was critically important to this county. So we didn't want to confuse the voter when we brought to the ballot a local option sales tax and expansion of the bed tax district. What could bring this back is it could be requested by a commissioner to bring it back. I don't have that right now. We have workshops lined up for the months of October and November. I do not suspect at this time it'll be brought to the board before the end of the year. If it's going to be considered for next year, it would have to be brought to the board early in 2020. It'd have to be brought early enough to be able to get the information to the supervisors' elections to place that on the ballot. But we are not that far down the road with this issue right now. This was just talked about in general terms. I was approached by the city manager for the city of Niceville some 8 or 10 months ago, and it was about process. What would it take to make this happen? What would it take to be able to expand the bed tax district across the bay? I've had general discussion about this very issue with the city of Crestview as well, but none of these entities have formally requested to expand this bed tax district at this time. But just wanted to make that clear, that you could have a commissioner that asks this be placed on a future workshop, and we would place it on a workshop to discuss. You've got my commitment that I'll reach out to Lance should that happen, so you've got a seat at the table for that discussion.
Ms. Ramswell has a question for you.
Yes, you brought to mind something for me. So the way it was being considered now to come forward for a vote was that those who wanted to join would be the ones that would get to vote for that opportunity to join us, correct?
Our understanding, and I'll let Mr. Stewart speak to this if he's so inclined, is if you have entities currently outside of the existing bed tax district and they are being asked to join the bed tax district, they have to vote on whether they want to be taxed within that expanded district. You're already taxed. You're already members of the bed tax district. So it would go to those entities outside of the bed tax district to determine if they want to be included.
So given the potential benefit for those that would join the district, doesn't it sound, well, logical, I guess is the wrong word, but it seems logical that those that are existing members would vote whether to allow those who wanted in to be in. Why is that not something that's up for discussion?
Totally understand, ma'am, and you're asking a question that these attorneys would have to give you the answer to. I'm just telling you, based on our interpretation of the current law, if you're going to expand the bed tax district and you're going to tax an entity that is not currently taxed, you have to ask them through a referendum whether they want to be included in that. You're already taxed.
Mr. Destin has a question for you.
No, I understand. I think I disagree with the legal foundation, and I understand that's just lawyers disagreeing, but it is a bit sort of anti-democratic, in my opinion, to say that, well, it's kind of like you live in your house and your neighbors move in, and they say, well, I say, you can't live here. I live here. And they say, well, we're going to take a vote, but you're not allowed to vote. And of course, they're going to say, yeah, it's great, and don't worry about it. I won't make a big mess. I'll do the dishes, and you cook, I'll clean. And you go, well, I didn't need a roommate. And that's, and I'm kind of tongue in cheek here, but that's a bit the way that, oh, well, the guys who are going to benefit that benefit greatly from this redistribution of the wealth and allowing them to come in and also potentially, unless we get this problem solved about whether or not they can drag all the funds and treasure back up north, it seems like our position won't change, but it comes with great risk. And I hope that we can continue working together. Like I said, there are ways to do this. I still will stick very hard on my point. If we're going to do this, I believe it has to happen codified at the legislative level. We can work with Mel Ponder's office. We can get it done. And I think that Mr. Stewart, some of our lawyers over here, we can get an agreement brokered. Then it's just a question of moving it through the legislature. The legislature.
Thanks,
So, thanks.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Mitchell, one last comment, I think.
First of all, thank you all. I understand what you're saying about it's not on the books right now, okay? It's obviously something, it's a work in progress. But as you said, John, it just takes one commissioner to say, hey, let's do a workshop, so it could potentially be out there. And I realize nobody can speak for the whole commission, but there's another issue here in a sense that you all, potentially you all being a commission, has a potential of several referendums possibly on looking forward next year. And the half-cent sales tax with the school district is a possibility. It's no more on the books than this is on the books, but it's certainly there. This is also a potential. And then the third thing, which again is, all of these things are different. I understand that, but you've got that appointed versus elected superintendent. So all three of those referendums, the county commissioners could touch and decide on. And obviously, the decision's going to have to be made which one's most important, because I don't know if you're going to want to take a bite of the apple on all three, or at least at two, because they're two separate taxes, but yet to the public, it's taxes. So that's just an interesting dilemma, because the school district certainly needs money. So obviously that, in my opinion, would take a priority, but again, nothing's on the books right now.
And I would agree, and I think it's kind of premature to have that discussion until we know that's actually the direction we're heading.
Sure.
But again, certainly, I will absolutely reach out to Lance and let you know when that happens.
And when my colleagues are finished with this, I want to bring up another thing while you all are here, please, before you leave.
Well, other than, I think you guys covered all your bases, so Mr. Mitchell, if you want to, while you have the important people from the county here.
That's it.
go ahead.
Well, I'm going to start, and then I'm going to ask Councilman Ramswell to start, and then I'll finish. She and Representative Gates had worked on something, and this is involving the 10% for law enforcement, okay? Just a couple of stats that we're looking at, just for information, just as some basis, and then I'd ask her to fill in some of the places. Captain Nix gave us some information at the last meeting regarding how many calls for service we had, okay? We had 29,349 in 2018. More specifically, I asked for calls for service from January 1st of this year to August 14th of this year. And Destin is obviously made up of several districts. Some of them are our district that we pay for in our contract, and the other is unincorporated Destin. And we determined that 952 times during that time frame, deputies that weren't the contract deputies that worked in Destin had to come into our area to help the Destin deputies. 952 times, we didn't have enough deputies in the Destin area that we pay for. So using that as a catalyst, obviously we can justify, we certainly need more deputies to handle Destin. But again, a large percentage of the calls for service for our deputies in here are from tourists. I'm going to stop right now and segue and let Ms. Ramswell tell you that, and I'll keep going. I'd just like you to discuss the 10%, please, that you had worked on.
Okay. I don't know, actually, we had an email that was exchanged between our attorney and Lynn, I always get her name, Hoshihara, is that it? Okay, and Greg, you may have been on there as well. But it was discussing the 10% that I had come to you guys and spoken about back in 2016, and still trying to get clarification and encourage the use of that 10%. And it appears as if we received guidance from the attorney that that is something that perhaps we can start pulling together some numbers and actually put in for some sort of funding from the TDC to utilize some of that additional 10% that wouldn't be supplanting current uses.
We have a process that's established. It's obviously tied to our budget cycle and yours. And so I believe that the current deadline for when you need to submit is April, so that'd be April of 20. And then that would be processed through, and we do get several law enforcement. So what I believe the email that Ms. Hoshihara was sent to Kyle was that, go ahead, if you can pull that in, there may be the ability to fund additional law enforcement here in the city of Destin. I mean, there is a limitation, but nevertheless, that is a process available to perhaps have that considered.
And that's exactly, again, that was great news for us, because we've been saying this and waiting for some feedback, and that's great news for us. I realize, as you just said, Mr. Stewart, that it's April 20th. but we can get with staff, and staff can start working and have this prepared and submitted for next year before April 20th for possible consideration.
Absolutely.
And up until now, we didn't know we could even do that. So this is all good news, and that's all we're working for, to try to get extra money for that.
Sir, we understand that.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you coming and spending time with us and briefing us and explaining to us where we're at in the process with this special taxing district. And I'm sure that we will be in close contact. Our attorneys and Commissioner Wines and myself will be staying up on it. So thank you very much. At this point, we're going to move into item number 3, which is our public comment period on agenda items that are not public hearings or any other matters not on the agenda. I don't have any yellow or blue cards, so I'll look out in the audience to see if anybody has anything they'd like to talk about tonight that's important to them that they think the council would like to hear or discuss. Mr. Wampler.
Thank you, Mayor. Ken Wampler, 310 Laripe Loop. One of the things that Councilman Braden and I sat on was the Floating Structure Committee for Okaloosa County, and we finished that assignment, and it's going to go to the workshop, to the county in a form of a workshop. And it would make sense for the city council to speak in favor or against, obviously, what the recommendations are. So I would ask that you put that on the agenda so you can have that conversation prior to October 22nd at 1:30. Oh, there was a lot of different recommendations. At the end of the main recommendation is at the end of 2020, floating structures are not going to be allowed on Crab Island. I mean, that's the biggest thing. And there's a litany of reasons that go behind that, but that's the biggest one. At the end of 2020, at the end of this year, you can't stay overnight. At the end of 2020, you can't do that at all. And remember that this is a shared responsibility. It's the National Park Service as well as the county. So, you know, the way this has worked was when the county takes initiative, then the Park Service has jumped on, and they're now reviewing it officially for this year and next year, and they're going to come down, and at the end of the day, whatever the National Park Service says is going to reign premier over anything. And so it makes sense that, you know, the county take an aggressive approach to it, and our committee and our recommendation to the county is that. So.
Okay, well, we appreciate it, and I'm sure some of our council members would definitely want to weigh in during those workshops. Anyone else? Looking around the room? Going once, going twice? Yeah, let's go ahead and take that recommendation, Lance, if you would, and get that on the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Wampler. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment period. There'll be another opportunity at the very end of the meeting for public comment. So if we discuss or talk about anything that sparks your interest and you'd like to make comment, you'll get one more opportunity. At this point, Lance, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4A is Resolution 19-16, the proposed fund balance policy. We have Mr. Farmer here to present that item.
Just to give you some background on this particular agenda item, this was a recommendation that was made by our auditors to formalize a fund balance policy and a policy on how much unspent and unallocated fund balance we had and would try to maintain. It's really more of a formal, just formalizing that policy as opposed to actually causing any change in the way we're actually managing the city. And I'll just ask that you review this if you have any questions or make a recommendation that this be passed.
I'll entertain a motion right now, and then if you have any questions or any further comments, we can make them at that time.
I'll make that motion. I move the council adopt Resolution 19-16.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it, Mayor.
And I got a second. Is there any discussion? Go ahead.
Yeah, the council has unfettered and unrestricted oversight over the budget, and I'm not interested in putting handcuffs on ourselves, and I'm not supporting this.
Ms. Ramswell. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I feel the same way, and I've already asked Ray to see if he couldn't find email or some kind of correspondence where the auditors have recommended this. It's kind of funny that they just now recommend, or they recommended this year, or last year, 2018, during that 2018. And it's just now coming forward, so, yeah, ain't no way I'm supporting this tonight.
I would just remind you that if you look at the audit report that was handed out last year and the year before, it was a recommendation that was made formally by them. I actually have a copy of it. I just happened to bring it with me, but it was a formal recommendation by the auditors to adopt this. It wasn't something that staff brought up.
Ms. Ramswell.
Nothing right now. Thank you.
I saw your name up there. Mr. Overdare.
Okay, so Bragg, this is something that we've always done. It's just that we're now kind of formalizing it by putting it into a resolution, right? I mean, we're not changing up any money, and it's not going to be any money that we can't get at if we have to. It's just, we're formalizing what we've always done.
Correct, and if it's something that, as Mr. Destin feels like might be tying your hands, we can always come in and modify the resolution to something that fits the desire of the council better.
So the language, Bragg, is the recommended language by the auditors.
The main recommendation is how much, if you look at the actual resolution, how much of the unassigned fund balance the city would try to maintain on an annual basis. And if you don't like the verbiage of that, we can always change that to something that's a little more amenable to the council. The way I developed this is I went out and pulled about 10 other cities and counties, as well as the state's recommendation on a fund balance policy and the GFOA's recommendation on this policy, and kind of came up with a summation of best practices for how to bring this resolution forward. And in the resolution, we actually talked about the unassigned fund balance, trying to maintain it equal or greater than 20% of our current fiscal year operating budget. In the past, we've tried to maintain a unassigned fund balance of 3 months spending, or 15 to 20% of our of our budget. Well, 3 months spending would be 25% of our annual budget, and so the 20% kind of fell in between that 15 to 20%, 25% that was recommended by previous auditors. And really, this is nothing more than just putting this on a sheet of paper, and for something for us to kind of have a desired goal for. Nothing is in cement. That percentage can change if you feel like it's, or if you feel like it's too low. That's really the city council's call. This is just trying to complete the only outstanding recommendation that the auditors had at the end of last year's audit.
Mr. Braden.
Yeah, I know at one point we had $7 million in this account, if not more. And my question was to the city manager, at what point does that come to the council and say, we've got $5 million, $7 million, do you want to put in, $3 million or $4 million into reserves? Nobody knew anything. Nobody had an answer for that. And my next question is why wasn't this brought to the council before now for discussion and for council's input before it was put on the agenda before tonight?
Funding is not put into the reserve per se. What happens is when we close the year out, which we're fixing to start that process, the funding in our fund balance actually gets broken up into different categories. There's 5 of them: a non-spendable fund balance, restricted fund balance, committed fund balance, assigned fund balance. The funds we're talking about now are the unassigned fund balance dollars. All those first four categories have specific reasons why they're there. The state set up those categories so that as you break down your, for lack of a better term, your savings account for the year, your unspent budgeted dollars, that you have some money that's probably set aside for a construction project, and say it's $3 million and you only spent $1 million of it. Well, that $2 million that's left doesn't go in as an unassigned spending account. You want to put it in an account that shows that it's already committed for something, so you don't want it to be as an unassigned dollar amount. And so what happens is when we close the year, we break up our ending unspent dollars into these four categories. And then anything that didn't fall into these four categories will fall into the unassigned fund balance. And so that's the only balance that we're talking about. And it's really just by setting a formal policy where the GFOA and the state have said, you know, you need to have a formal policy on what kind of balance you want in that unassigned fund balance, so that you maintain, you have something kind of a goal to maintain that balance at. But it's not a hard and fast goal. That goal can be changed based on how the city council feels like they feel what needs to be in that account.
So where did the $10 million that we have in reserves, where did that money come from?
That comes from unspent dollars from previous years, but there again, it's broken up into all five of these categories. You were correct. At the end of last fiscal year, we had about, rounding, like $6.8 million in our unassigned fund balance. Of that, you committed $2 million for the purchase of waterfront property, unspent, so it's still there, and I believe $2.7 million for the advanced funding of acquisition of property for the Crosstown Connector. And there again, that money is not spent, but it's there. So you've left yourself with approximately $2 million as an unassigned balance of that unassigned balance from last year. But in truth, you still have the 6.7, 6.8 million is still in that account.
Okay, I'm confused, because you just got through telling me that we cannot use that money from the unassigned fund balance to go into reserves, and then you just got through telling me that we could, that money comes from these unassigned accounts.
The unassigned fund balance can be used by the city council for anything you choose.
So the $6.8 million, whatever it was, some of that money could have went in, we could have put $2 million into reserves and would have had $12 million instead of $10 million.
Well, the 6.8 is your reserves. That is your savings account, your reserves.
So what happened to the $10 million that Raymond James has?
They still have it. It's all invested.
So we could have put $2 million of the 6.8 into that and had $12 million.
Yes, you're correct. I see. Yes, we could have invested some of that unassigned fund balance in our Raymond James account, correct.
I mean, I know when we were discussing before, just saying instead of $6.8 million sitting in an account collecting nothing, it would have been better off putting some of it in an account where it was collecting some kind of money. Yeah, that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Braden. I got two other council members. I just have two quick questions for you. First of all, this resolution, you didn't make it up.
No, I did write it, but I used a significant of other people's work to help put it together.
And whether we pass it or we don't pass it, it's still the recommendation of the auditors that we establish a written policy.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor. Bragg, you mentioned about at the end of the year you have a pot of money, okay? And then you just sit down and decide which of these balances it goes into. Who decides that?
I don't make that decision. The auditors make it based on the, a good example, the restricted fund balance, that could be your impact fees.
I understand.
So you can't spend that somewhere else. Those get pulled off to the side.
So my point, I guess, let me be more specific. At the end of the year, we have some money, whatever that pot is. I'm trying to find out protocol, if you will, and procedure. Are you going to come back to the council and say, council, I've got this money left, where do I put it?
I don't follow you.
Okay, you said a few minutes ago that you put this money in these different balances, be it the non-spendable, restricted, et cetera, okay? That money, that pot of money gets thrown into those balances. When we end up with this pot of money at the end and it gets divided in those balances, we should be the ones making that decision.
No, that's made by accounting rules by the state. Those definitions are...
Percentage-wise.
It's not done on a percentage basis.
Okay.
It's done based on the state's definitions of these categories.
Okay.
And so if you have committed funds out there, they go into these categories based on the type of funding. The funding that we're talking about now, other than those categories, is the unassigned fund balance, which is yours to assign how you choose. So if you choose to set aside $2 million for waterfront property, then we pull that aside. It still stays in that unassigned balance until it gets spent, but that money's pulled out on the books.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Ramswell.
Thanks. So I guess my question goes back to the recommendation that you incorporate this, because when you look into the GASB 54 and why it was done, when it was done, these changes were actually requested to be made back in 2009. So we're now 10 years past that, and I guess you're saying the auditor had it in that. Did they have it in years prior to that as well, and we didn't follow it those years? I mean, I don't know, but they're saying that the reporting is that there are still major problems with incorporating this. Two of them are that the descriptions remain vague and that reserved funds are still reported at about 80%. So the goal of trying to better, increase the level of detail has not been made. And so I'm wondering, number one, why we're looking at trying to do this, something that was recommended or initially rolled out 10 years ago, and second, if it's really not working and there's a bunch of questions being proposed by municipalities, why do you want to go ahead and do it?
Well, it may have been rolled out back in 2009, but we've been breaking out our fund balance with these categories in our final audit report, I guess probably since 2010. This is the first auditors that have ever come forward and said, hey, we want you to have a formal policy on how you record those funds and how you establish how much you want in that unassigned fund balance.
So the way we're doing it currently is not illegal or incorrect. It's just another layer that you feel that you'd like to put in there.
Well, the auditors feel like we should just have a formal policy on that, that's all. But we haven't done, right, I mean, not having the policy is not a violation of state statutes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to call this to a vote before we wear ourselves out. Motion fails, so you just keep doing it the way you've been doing it.
Item 4B is the proposed settlement agreement relating to short-term rentals at 84 and 86 Hutchinson Street, and Ms. Kopp will be presenting this item.
Thank you, Lance. So in your agenda packet is a copy of 2 pre-suit notices of claim and accompanying appraisals for 2 properties on Hutchinson Street and Crystal Beach. Those are 84 and 86 Hutchinson Street. We actually have a couple, 3 more of those houses coming at the next meeting, but we did just divide them up in the interest of time and because these two claims came in first. But the buildings are basically the same. They were all recently constructed. The building official is here to answer specific questions about the construction, but at this time, staff is recommending that we consider this proposed settlement agreement. It was requested by the property owner to have a maximum occupancy of 34 on the property. The building official is not that far from that number. She's at 32.8, which I guess that would mean 33, right? 33. Since we can't divide people. So, so the buildings were constructed, though, almost to the commercial building code. They're sprinkled. They don't have the parking and safety concerns that some of the smaller single-family residences would have, and for that reason, we are recommending settlement of them. The property owner and his attorney are also here if you have questions, as is the building official.
All right, I'll entertain a motion at this point so we can have discussion and questions.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All right, we got a motion to second. Ms. Ramswell? Oh,
I move that the council adopt, wait, that's the wrong one. I don't even see a motion here to actually read, but is it more direction or?
Well, if you want to direct us to enter into the proposed settlement agreement, I would just want to be clear on whether the number is the 33 recommended by the building official or the 34 by the property owner, or if you want us to negotiate that with the property owner. I mean, it's a difference of one, so.
Ugh. I would say let y'all negotiate with that so that we're not sitting here and negotiating, but I'm happy to do either. I mean, for the sake of making a motion, I'll go ahead and say the 30, what did you say, the 32 and a half?
It's essentially 33.
So I will go ahead and make the motion to enter into settlement negotiations looking at a...
Rebel, that's just an agenda item report that does not make it into the electronic version.
Okay, so looking at negotiating a settlement based on 33% occupancy?
Okay, and we did put the form settlement agreement in the agenda. Did it not make it into your copy? Because it is in mine.
Yes.
Settlement agreement's in there. There's an agenda item report that is not.
So the settlement agreement is what we're looking for you to approve, just with a number of 33 instead of 34.
Yes, make it so.
Okay, great.
That's the motion?
Second.
We got a second. All right, Mr. Destiny, you good? All right, we have a motion, we have a second to move forward with the settlement agreement as written by our attorneys. Any further discussion? 33. All right, seeing no further discussion, we'll take it to a vote. Ayes have it, so moved. Ms. Kopp?
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, item 4C is Development Order 93-29, Destiny PUD minor change order. We have Ms. Lauren Witt to present this item.
Thank you. The Destiny Planned Unit Development has a required 25-foot waterfront setback that should be applied to all homes built in the Destiny community. Due to inadvertent oversight over the past few decades, this hasn't been consistently followed. The original development order was executed in 1993. So staff is proposing to amend this development order to reduce that waterfront setback to 10 feet, consistent with the rear setback. There's approximately half of the waterfront homes currently in the Destiny development that do not meet the 25-foot setback right now, so that would also correct a lot of the existing non-conforming homes.
Okay, I move to direct staff to prepare an amendment to the Destiny PUD DO 93-29 to include the following setbacks: front 20 feet, side 5 feet, rear 10 feet.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this? Seeing none? Ayes have it, so moved.
Mr. Mayor, item 4D is Resolution 19-21, cost sharing for the harbor carrying capacity study. And we have Ms. Lauren Witt again to present this.
Thank you. This resolution is a follow-up from your previous discussion and action regarding the cost sharing with the Corps of Engineers for the harbor carrying capacity study. This is really just so that we are ready when that money becomes available from the Corps of Engineers. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any council members have any questions?
So explain to me, is this the normal procedure for this type of study, that it would be a cost share? Or typically in other scenarios, does one entity or the other cover the total cost?
Typically, it is a cost share. It's typically about a 50-50 split between the city and the Corps of Engineers.
Thanks.
The main reason we wanted this capacity study was to address some of the critical issues in harbor. In most cases, we would have foot the bill for the whole thing. The fact that they're going to step up and pay half is a good thing for our city. So let's go ahead and I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve Resolution 1921 and the associated cost sharing for the harbor carrying study between the city and the Army Corps of Engineers.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none. Ayes have it, unanimous, so moved. He's about to break the button. Keep pushing it. All right, go ahead, sir.
Mr. Mayor, item 4E is an extension of the livery vessel moratorium, and we have Ms. Kopp here to present the item. I believe it is scheduled right now to expire on or about November the 1st.
Kim, I can take this if you want. Sure. You looked puzzled, so.
Yeah. But anyway, no, we are bringing this to you because, like Lance said, it is about to expire and we'd like it extended probably for at least another 9 months. 12? 12 would be okay.
I'd like to make a motion to extend it for 12 months.
Second.
I got a motion and a second.
Council, just so you know, we need to bring this back to you guys. This is just discussion tonight, so.
Yeah, this, you got to write the resolution, right?
Do you still need a motion?
To give you direction to do it?
If you want to give us direction like that, you can. I just didn't want you to think that by passing this motion, you were passing a 12-month additional moratorium.
Now, let's go ahead and
He
do a
directed
motion.
to give us a motion.
There you go. So you amended your motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay, second's good. Before we vote, I see a couple people want to chat. Mr. Marlar.
Can I ask why we need to extend it?
You just authorized that harbor study, and the results of that study will go into what we do on the livery vessels. So that is the reason for the discussion of extending.
Can we get a report on what's already been done in the next couple of
We
meetings?
can ask Mr. Forgione to do that at the next council meeting. Yes, he is out of town as of today.
Yeah, he's on vacation, I understand. Okay.
Ms. Ramswell.
I'm good.
All right, let's take a vote. Ayes have it, so moved. That's your direction.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A few announcements. Number one, I just wanted to give an update on both Captain Royal Melvin Heritage Park and Clement Taylor Park, where they're at in the queue. At the last county commission meeting, the county commission voted to approve both applications so that they could be, the final applications could be submitted to the U.S. Treasury. So they are now in the U.S. Treasury's hands. The U.S. Treasury has indicated to staff that their goal is to get those processed within 3 months. So with any kind of luck, we will be seeing some money back within 3 months.
Christmas?
Christmas present, hopefully.
That would be awesome.
Right? So that would be good if we could finally see both of those parks under construction. Any questions on that for me?
Any questions on that, folks? Go ahead, Mr.
So we can't put it out for bid or anything until we get the funding?
We could, but we would be on our own dime.
Okay. But we can't do anything until we have the money in hand, then we can start.
Right. Once they have awarded it, then we can immediately start because we're going to be asking for reimbursement. So we'll be funding this upfront and then getting reimbursed for it.
So how, just because I know where Mr. Braden's going with it, how far out front of it can we get? Or do we really need to get the final approval?
If we want to ensure that we get 100% reimbursement, we need to wait until they tell us that we have received the awards.
Okay, thank you, sir. Continue.
On October the 7th, we will be holding a CRA board meeting at 5:45 to adopt the CRA budgets. Just wanted you to put that on your calendar. So we'll be starting 15 minutes early before the next council meeting so we can adopt the CRA budgets. On this Friday, I'm sorry, was there a question?
That starts at 5:30. Meeting, our regular city council meeting will be right after, right?
Our regular council will be at 6, so we'll start this at 5:45. We only need 15 minutes to get it done. Yeah. Good. All right. Last year, I don't know if you remember, but about this same time of year after Labor Day, I had asked that you allow the staff to have a staff appreciation day after they made it through the 100 days of summer. I would love to do the same thing again this year. If we could do it this Friday, that would be fantastic. And I apologize for the short notice, but...
So moved.
Second.
Second. No further discussion.
Where's the barbecue?
We're gonna actually eat at City Hall and then adjourn to the track for some go-karting and some. I'm challenging everyone in miniature golf. So, all right.
Okay. And so we got a motion, a second, and let's vote on that.
Joey comes back to a 3-day weekend.
So moved. Okay, and then are we gonna wager on the go-kart races? I mean, can we all participate?
Everyone can participate.
All right. Side bet. Bring your brown bags,
We're not
everybody.
invited.
Brown bag, side bet.
I used to work there. I'll make sure that there's some challenges for you guys.
All right, very good. Right now, we are looking at visioning on November the 7th. That's the first week of November, a Thursday. It seems like that's the best day so far, so if there's any conflicts, please let us know. Otherwise, we're going to lock in our facilitator, and I asked Mr. Ed Eddy, a.k.a. Buzz Eddy, if he would be willing to do it, because he seems to have a good relationship with all of us, and he agreed to do it. So I will lock that date in if you're all okay with that. For the visioning, we don't have the time yet. It'll be an all-day thing. We'll start at 6 in the morning, probably go till 10 at night.
I make a motion that it be at 9 and over at 4. Oh, I can't make motions. So it'll be what? 8 to 4?
Yeah, it'll probably be an 8 to 5 deal, yeah.
4.
We'll try to keep it as tight as we can. Yeah.
Mark it down all day.
Right. The last thing I have is you were informed last meeting that there was some damage done by there was a company doing some boring under the road, and they damaged one of our roads out on Hutchinson Street. We have since received a check from that company to repair the road. It's a substantial amount of money, almost $38,000. So, I mean, our policy technically says I need to come to you if I'm going to spend more than $15,000. I have the check, so I was wanting a consensus for us to go ahead and get this work done.
Does that cover all the expenses and all the damage?
Yes, ma'am. That's the quote we received from H&T to replace a significant section of Hutchison.
I think we got a consensus. I see a bunch of head bobbling.
I'd go
Mr.
ahead
Braden?
and-
Mr. Braden?
I think I'd go ahead and get a motion on this since you're spending.
Yeah, let's do a motion for him then.
Do we
Okay.
have an estimate for that?
Yes.
It's going to cost that amount?
That's where the
Yes.
check came from, it was a bid to repair it. Was 38,000, Michael?
Yes, sir. That was just for Scenic 98 at Hutchinson. That was the original occurrence. Subsequent to that, we still have about 60,000, a little over 60,000 of quotes that we have to settle up with them on. And in addition, Destin Water Users has a few invoices for them as well. And Steve Schmidt with DWE is going to be sending me those tomorrow because we want to make sure that everyone involved, it's settled up on before we allow them to begin work again.
So the amount that you got was just for the 98 Hutchison repair?
That is correct.
Do we have something in writing stating just that? That's what it's for?
Yeah, we've got the quote. I'll give you a
And not
copy.
releasing them of any liability from anything else with that 38,000?
No, the invoice that we sent them was specifically for Hutchinson, and the check they sent back mentioned Hutchinson.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Okay, want to do a motion for him? I got it. Go ahead. We have a motion. We have a second. Any further discussion? Vote unanimous, so moved. There you go, Lance.
That's all I have tonight, Mr. Mayor.
We have no public hearings tonight, correct? So, the consent agenda. I need a
Mr. Mayor, I
motion.
want to pull A for discussion.
Okay, we're going to pull A, 6A, for discussion. Any others? Seeing none, I'll take a motion for the consent agenda.
I move to adopt consent agenda B through K.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. Is there any further discussion on this? Seeing none? Ayes unanimous, so moved. Go ahead, Mr. Braden, or Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor. When we got this information about the cost, that we didn't have the actual specific work that was performed. So I would suggest in the future, when we get something like this, please include all of the information regarding all the stuff. That way it gives us a better idea. The one thing I wanted to discuss was, and everybody knows I'm an animal lover, okay? This is not against animals. But the feline portion, okay, as I appreciate it based on the information that's here, the services they perform, they trap cats, they do spade, neutering type thing, they tag them, and they release them back out on the street, okay? And then they have feeding stations, okay? Now, staff, correct me if I'm wrong anywhere along here, okay? But we're paying them to do that. Had this conversation with the city manager. We're allowing these cats to run, and we're feeding. And as I appreciate it, they're being fed daily, and the company that does it, whoever does it, they don't go back and retrieve the food. So that food is out there at those feeding stations. And all year long, we've been talking about coyotes, okay? The feral cats are not the only thing eating out of those feeding stations, okay? I'm not going to tell you that is the sole purpose or the problem for our coyote, but there's a lot of the animals that eat out of that, and I think we need to discuss that. Obviously, it's something in place. I'm not challenging the money or anything else. I'm challenging the process. They're feeding, and the food's out there all day long, okay? I think we need to talk about that.
Yeah, I agree, and we have, Mr. Warren and I have we've met with that group once and made a request to them if they could please start picking up their food. I mean, we're not telling them not to feed these animals, we're just asking them not to leave them there overnight. And then when the food is out, if they could elevate it to a point where only the cats could get to it, it would be a second thing they could do. And we plan to meet with them again, because with this new contract, we want to work through some of these issues and maybe try to include it in the contract.
In light of this, Mr. Mitchell, would you like to make a specific motion to change the contract or change the process? What would you like to do?
Yeah, I think it's great that you do it. I kind of question the fact that we're catching and releasing cats. Okay, I find that interesting because we're allowing cats just to run over the street. I don't understand that part of it. We don't let dogs run all around. Again, I'm an animal lover, but I don't understand that. But I just think if staff work it out, whether we need a motion or not, I just wanted to bring it up for discussion. I'm open for suggestion. I just think we need to do something about the food. Leaving it out there, I think, is problematic.
Mr. Warren corrected me. He actually already included that in the new contract, so those are going to be requirements as of October 1 when this contract goes into effect.
Mr. Braden?
So they will remove the feeding stations and there will be no more?
What we inserted in the contract is that the food would only be out during the day, and it would also, if there were coyotes identified in the area, they would elevate any feeding stations that would be operable during the day out of the reach of the coyotes, but still within the reach of the cats. And if they also identify any coyote activity around the feeding stations, they would report it to us.
Yeah, I think the process is the rats eat the food and then the cats eat the rats and then the coyotes eat the cats. That's the whole process. That's why we got a
I'm glad you said that on the public record, sir, because I was thinking that from the very beginning.
Where, just out of curiosity, do we have a location of where these feeding stations are?
So another provision we added into the contract is if we requested those locations, that they provide it to us.
So you've made some changes to the contract to address Mr. Mitchell's concerns?
Yes, sir. If you look in the contract, it should be in there. I think there was 4 new provisions that we added, and I think it covers what we just discussed, other than the food chain that Mr. Braden discussed.
Okay.
Okay, with that said, I'll make the motion to go ahead and approve A on the consent agenda.
All right, I got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second. Seeing no further discussion, because Mr. Braden said it all, we'll take a vote. Unanimous, so moved. Cats are safe. And then, Mr. Braden.
All right, with all this coming up on the consent agenda, reminded me, I think our concrete contract is coming up, I believe before long. If we can, city manager, if you can go ahead and put that under my name for the next council meeting, I'd like to see if we could make some changes to the way we pour our concrete sidewalks. So that that's in the next contract for the continuous concrete contract. And then the whole Crab Island thing, Ken stole my thunder on that one. It's all right. We did have our last meeting, and we did vote to eliminate all floating structures as of 2021. Some other things was we're putting fees on structures over 1,500 square feet. Some other things they had to be, I think we're come up with a fee schedule for the guys on the little ice cream boats and peanut boats. It was $200 for that. If those guys, because they were coming in and leaving, they didn't have to pay the $1,000 or $1,500 is what it's going to be for the permanent structures. Had to have cages on their props. But they still, the question came up, did they still have to leave overnight this year? Yes, that as of November 1, they have to leave overnight, and they have to go into a marina facility. They just cannot pull out into the bayou somewhere up in the harbor and throw the anchor and then drag it back out the next morning. It's got to go in a marina. And then I think that was if we wanted to, when they have that, we're having a workshop, the county is, to put these recommendations together to submit to the county. And if the council would like, instead of all of us showing up, I can represent the council at that workshop and say that, the council is in favor of these recommendations that we've made. And I can also get the council a copy of the recommendations just as soon as we have a copy of them, that they're written.
Well, you are on the council, so that just only makes sense. I mean, on the committee. I do have a question, because when you're dealing with entrepreneurs, and you're trying to legislate them out of the place, did you cover all the other bases, because the Peanuts guys and stuff, the little floaty guys, they're going to still keep coming. In fact, what I'm thinking is with the floating structures totally banned, we have a whole pile of them there'll be all kinds of floating wave runners and guys towing floating structures because they're not permanently moored. Did you guys talk about that in your discussions?
We did, and I think that also they're going to put in that ordinance where they have to operate out of a commercial site and do any pickup, drop-off out of a commercial site, like a rented dock slip. You just can't take them to the other side of the bridge, drop the people off, let them walk across the beach or whatever and into the water and then get up on a boat and be...
So you were trying to think about it.
Yeah, we're trying to nip that in the bud. Oh, yeah, we're limited to 15, I guess, and that's only going to be this coming year, 15. I think floating structures, that was permits altogether, because there's a total of, I think, 31 permits issued. Now it's like 11 floating structure permits, and then the rest are peanut guy, ice cream guy.
So it's going to be limited to 15 of the little guys. So you nip that in the bud too for 2020?
15 little guys and how many?
0, 15 total.
So that includes the peanut guys, but how did they decide who gets the permit? There first? But there were 31, so they...
Ken, you want
Ken, can you...
come on up, Ken. I'm curious. Yeah.
And you still have the floor, Mr. Braden, so you guys can go back and forth here, because just so we know exactly what we're getting into, especially when they had that workshop.
Good questions, and obviously the way your question was addressed, the mobile vessels this year do not have a fee. They can register for the National Park Service, but the county didn't have a fee for them, so we instituted a $200 per vessel fee. So if you have 5 jet skis, that's 5 different vessels. A business can have 1 permit in 5 vessels, but you can only get 1 permit, and it's $200 per vessel. The way the county addressed how are we going to restrict it from 31 down to 15, they didn't really play that out in the ordinance, but they know that's a challenge that they're going to have to face. And the only thing they talked about was, those people that currently have permits, that are active permits, we're going to have first choice. But obviously, if you go from 31 to 15, someone's going to get left out. And they didn't say how they were going to do that.
What about the water park or the playgrounds?
As of the end of next year, you can't have them at all. At the end of this year, November, you can't leave it overnight.
You can't have
anchored structures. You have to be a vessel. Right,
putting around and
you got to have a motor on your engine or a motor on your barge or whatever you want to call it.
Starting November 1, if you're going to have to put motor on your floating structure because you got to take it home every night.
That's correct.
So that's going to the bouncy game is over with starting November 1.
It's going to leave every night and come back. But
that ain't going to happen. It takes you 2 days to set the thing up.
One of the guys had said he'd already made arrangements to do that. Well, whether he does it or not, who knows? But he spoke to us and said that he actually made arrangements, and he was going to do that starting after November of this year.
He said it was 6 miles to the marina he had to go to every night?
Yeah, that's right. And it's a commercial marina. You can't just...
But they said the floating structures took them 4 days to set up, so there was no way they was going to be able to move in and out overnight. So I don't know what they're going to do.
I don't know.
Well, that was the intent, right?
Yeah.
And you're on that board, Rodney?
Yes, sir.
You're on the board?
And Ken.
How many boards are you on?
All of them.
Well, thanks to Charles, he made me chair that board, so we won't go any further than that.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you, Rodney.
Thanks.
Any more?
Now, the only thing we had talked about was the trying to get the county out of it because we believe the state is going to take it over, or there's been talk about the state taking it over, the National Parks and Seashore people. They may run it and issue permits or license or whatever, but that may be a couple years down the road, if at all. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks, sir. Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question, actually, and I'm not sure if, Mr. City Manager, this is to you or to staff in general, but the Gulf Power information that we got this evening. I was just wondering how this is done, because it looks like different months have a different number of items, and in some months, some things have charges, other months they don't. And then one of my big questions was, there's one on page, I think it's 5, like the second one down, it says City of Destin street light for $13,000. Like, how is that further delineated? Because it looks like throughout it has street light, street light, street light. Why is that one so much higher than the rest, and where is that location?
Sure, I'll take a stab at that. The document itself started as a conversation between myself and Mr. Minchell. He brought it up, whether or not we were paying for ghost meters out in the medians, where there's no way we're using water right now because the medians are torn up. So that's how it started. To the lighting issue, the big bill that we got, because Lorraine, my administrative assistant, researched this until she figured it out. It is actually when we installed the new lighting right outside here on Indian Bayou Trail, they failed to bill us for the first year. So they caught their mistake and billed us all at once.
Way.
Yeah. And with some of the ones that are zero on one week and not on the other, I haven't seen the exact times, but it could be some like the construction zone.
Well, and that's what I was thinking, but then, like, one of them is the Matthew at Emerald Coast Highway traffic light. Well, that traffic light, I don't recall it not functioning. So that's why I just couldn't, and I don't expect you to have all these answers because I'm just bringing it up now, but if you could look into that, and
Sure.
If you could send us the actual spreadsheets, because this is stuff I like to like literally organize and really look at in detail, and I know Mr. Minchell does, because a few years ago, what did you catch, like a $30,000 error or something? So we can help.
Thank you.
Sure. Other thing is that I attended for the mayor, the Okaloosa County League of Cities luncheon the other day, and Commissioner Carolyn Ketchel was there and talked about how one of the recurring issues that they're dealing with is homelessness in this area, and what is being done to try to combat it is the wrong word, but there are apparently two distinctions. There are folks there that actually want to be out there, and then there are others that really, as they call it, really do need a hand up. And so the focus is on those that need a hand up. And to combat, I keep saying combat, but to help remedy that situation, they are going to be opening another homeless facility, a shelter, if you will, on the south side. So there will then be two separate facilities, one on the north side and one on the south side, so that these folks that need, a warm place to sleep will actually have that. And they're looking at, I believe they said, opening that in the spring of 2020. So just wanted to share that information with you all. It is something that is being looked at, and it's clearly a problem now that it's all over the area and not just isolated to one city or town. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate you covering for me too, by the way. They serve a good lunch though, so it's not all that bad. Go ahead, Mr. Mitchell.
Okay, I had a bunch and now I have even more, I'm sorry. But regarding the Gulf Power thing, obviously I'm extremely familiar with that. And I just have one question. Just in answer to your question, Councilman Ramswell, at $13,000, typically what that is, in my past experience, it's a grand total of all of the street lights that we pay for. That's where the $13,000. It's been
They're
like,
listed separately. If you look,
Okay.
keep looking down.
I understand. But I'm just saying that's what that is. But my question is, going back to years going by, Bragg, do we have a working inventory of all of the streetlights?
Actually, I think we went through that as a city about 3 or 4 years ago, so that we
Right.
identified all of our streetlights, all the county's streetlights, because
That's the project I was on where we came up with the money. But
Yeah,
do we have
so
a current?
I believe it's in our GIS system now, correctly?
I believe you're correct. I would have to double check that.
Okay. All right, we'll follow up with that. Okay, Along the same lines that the city manager talked about, and I failed to pull I on the consent agenda, the right-of-way maintenance, okay? Obviously, we have less right-of-way maintenance as far as grass right now because we have less grass. So my question is, was our bill adjusted this year to pay less for that maintenance contract?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, great. All right, that's that. Next thing is, regarding, Mike, you were talking about, we got the money back for the damage at Hutchinson. Have we identified any other damage in the last 2 weeks since we had our last meeting? That they've, you know, again, there was some still things out there that they may or may not have had other damage.
We have not identified any other damage. We are going to go back about 6 months and look at all of our, actually have it printed out right here, of all the boring permits that we've issued for the last 6 months. So we're going to take them each one by one and do an assessment.
Okay. And while you're on the microphone, my next question is, what's the status of the street sweeper? I know it's under repair, but do we have any kind of due date? Do we have any kind of status on that?
Yes, sir. Timco is the manufacturer of the sweeper, and they were out on vacation after Labor Day, and they were kind of doing internal inventories and such, but it is still under repair. It is still in Mobile. Just as an update, it has a brand-new engine in it. When they were driving it around, the check engine light came on. It's got a brand-new engine in it, and it cut down to about 35 miles an hour, and it wouldn't go any faster.
Is it diesel or is it gas?
It's diesel, Councilor Destin. But either way, after it's done at the body shop in Mobile, it'll be driven to Pensacola, where the engine will be it'll be looked at again. It's an Isuzu engine.
Okay, thank you. And then, next question is the status of Beach Drive. Dave, I know you're ready for that. If we could just, we had some issues. Code of Compliance has been working on it, and a lot's happened in the last couple of weeks. If you could just give us an update, please.
Yes, sir. These have been identified as... Okay. Yes, sir. These have been identified as long-term rentals, and we're still currently trying to get them registered. We did have some furniture out there that had been left out there for a long time. That furniture has been removed. There were also several junk vehicles on the property. These vehicles have either been properly tagged and registered or have been removed, so that they've come into compliance that way. We've had a problem with the trash cans being left out or put out too early or left out too long. All of the property owners on the corner there from Legion Drive and also over to Beach Drive have been notified about the proper times to put them out, and so we're hopeful that they can adhere to that. Additionally, we've identified 3 cans on that property that stay out there, and they actually do not even belong to any of the property owners there. They came from Mattie Kelly Boulevard. I don't know. And we've contacted Waste Management, and they will be removing those 3 cans.
I appreciate it, and again, I told you, Dave, but one of the citizens that had called in to me and complained about it is watching this, and I appreciate that because they now have an update. So we appreciate all the hard work on that.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Last but not least, we've obviously beat it into the ground. I know I have about the 10%, and obviously it's a work in progress. I don't know if we're going to put that on the vision session, whatever we're going to do, but that's going to be something that we want to champion. Obviously, we have till next year to get that in place, but that's certainly something. And I guess the last thing, and I know our public information officer did this, but a big kudos to one of our own for saving a life. Okay, Murray Casey did a fantastic job, and hip hip for him. Mayor, I think maybe we ought to have him here at some point.
I think it'd be a great idea. Recognizes greatness.
That's all, thank you.
Skip? You?
Just one. Do we have any status update on a street light, a stop light or something at the end of Henderson Beach Drive and Commons Drive? I know I've brought it up about the county putting in a light. There's no street light there. There's no stop light there. I saw 2 near pedestrian accidents just the other night.
Mr. Marler, as of right now, we know that the engineering has taken place so that that traffic intersection can be signalized. And that's as far as we've gotten.
Okay, who has the jurisdiction right there at the corner on the Hutchinson?
County.
That's the county. The county's doing the
Can we
engineering.
reach out to them at least to get, see if they can get a light, street light out there?
We can do that.
Commissioner Kelly. Thank you, sir. Mr. Destin? Mr. Destin?
Nothing.
Ms. Morgan? Nothing for me. Land use attorney.
I have two quick items. One is the required monthly TRC update, and the two projects going to TRC this month are in your agenda packet. Those are currently under review by staff. And the second item, I would ask if we could discuss it at the next council meeting when Mr. Forgione is back, especially since Council Member Morgan asked for a livery vessel update because it all goes together, and Joey can make the same presentation he made at the Harbor Board to you all, and then we can discuss the Harbor Board's recommendation.
Yeah, and could you maybe throw some items in that letter so we have a starting point?
Yeah, and that's why I was thinking it would be best if Mr. Forgione talked to you about it first so that we could talk about the items to go in the letter. The Harbor Board made a general motion to send a letter to waterfront property owners on the harbor, the 11 or so of them that there are, just discussing code enforcement efforts being increased and the potential for the actual owners of the property to get more of the violation notices than just the tenants.
Okay, but the reason I'm saying that is, so it's not just on Joey, maybe you guys could put together a draft letter.
Sure.
And then for him to speak on it.
Sure, we can do that.
And then we can parse and
Sure, we'll
add
put
or
a draft
subtract.
in the next agenda.
That's
Sounds
all-
good.
That's all I want. Is that it? Okay, Mr. Bowman?
Just one item real quick. On Friday of last week, legal counsel for the Coleman Kelly Trust reached out to the city and wanted to know if the city was possibly interested in purchasing some land owned by the Coleman Kelly Trust. One parcel is, you see on the screen up there. This is adjacent to the Morgan Sports Center right down here. It is a parcel of land that I believe is encumbered by a utility easement. There's another piece of land that we do not have an aerial of, but it's located in Crystal Beach. It's also an east-west connector that is encumbered by a utility easement. They would be interested in selling one or both parcels to the city. At this time, I'm not asking for you guys to make a motion and purchase it. I just want some consensus to investigate the matter further and then bring it back at a future council meeting.
Yeah, as part of your investigation, can you determine why we would want to purchase land that we can't use?
There is potential to use it, for instance, possibly in the multimodal for, bicycles
Like
and
a
pathways
trail?
and stuff, that kind of stuff. That's kind of stuff we will investigate and tell you what you can use it for.
And I
Go
can
ahead, Lance.
speak to this parcel here. It is directly behind the parking area for Morgan's, and whether we are allowing it or not, it has become the overflow parking lot for our big tournaments, so.
Can we use it for parking if we buy it? And what parcel were you identified in Crystal Beach?
So whether we can use it for parking is something we'll have to bring back to you guys at a future meeting.
If that's the Gulf Power easement line, we talked about that maybe for parking, and I thought the citizens of Crystal Beach were going to stone us. So I don't know that will, if it's that same sort of linear easement there.
We can get plexiglass and put it here across the front because we really need parking.
I believe it is that parcel, Ms. Ramswell. We'll look at it, though, and bring it back to you.
All right, thank you, sir. Is that all you have? Meeting adjourned.
Public comment.
Oh, I forgot. Hold on. Anybody want to say anything? I forgot. Meeting adjourned.